we're going to do, here's what we're going to, I want to make a couple of comments about this just to kind of reinforce some things that we were talking about. We'll briefly look at the names list, okay, where you can see who those folks are and see if there's commonality. I think that will help. And then we'll move on to causal theory. And we'll, okay, is that okay? All right. So when we look at the demographic, I want us to be really clear on what the relationship is between that, and then your achievement data. For example, if we look at percentage of economically disadvantaged in the bottom 30%, this is where it gets a little bit weird because we've not really looked at it this way before. Okay, yes, there were 118 students, or 35%, that of those tested happen to be children who live in poverty. Okay, so if there was if all things being equal, we would expect then 35% of those who are in the bottom 30%, right, to be children who live in poverty, right? Not that we want anybody to be non-proficient or to be in the bottom 30%, but that's the way it is. But if we were to look at this, and let's just grab an easy one like reading, where we see the number of economically disadvantaged in the bottom 30%. Okay, so we can look at this two ways. You can look first that 43 out of 118 are children who live in poverty. Makes sense. That's a low percentage, right? However, it's of the 91 who are in the bottom 30%. Okay, and now if you take the 43 out of the 91, we have almost half of the children who are in the bottom 30% in reading happen to be children who live in poverty. So you can twist those numbers, just not on purpose or anything, but just depending on the number you choose can completely change your perception of that. So yeah, you could say, 43 out of 118, well, all that 118 aren't necessarily in that 91. You see what I mean? So if we say that half of 50% of the bottom 30% happens to be children who live in poverty, then that would be a disproportionate number, right? Because that would be 50% compared to the 35% that we would see, from overall student population. So there's a couple of different ways that you can look at it. It changes your perspective a little bit depending on which denominator that you choose. And you could do that for any, but I wanted to just kind of throw that out there. Okay. Any other big final comments about any of this? Different lenses that we've looked at before. Okay. Does this mean here that that poverty is going down? If we look at this line here, it's going from 36 to 24. Does that mean that poverty is decreasing? No. Okay. Just that happened to be the demographic of the kids who took the test. So out of all of those kids, you've got more kids in grade 3 who happen to be living in poverty than you had in grade 6, but that doesn't mean that poverty is decreasing. You're probably like everybody else, it's increasing. It increases, it's not decreasing.
Well over 40%.
Are you over 40% this year? 49%. Wow. Okay, now, and there's that's an interesting demographic, because if we, as we look at this, we see that there's a disproportionate number of those that were tested a year ago, and we're getting more children who live in poverty coming in. That means we got to ramp it up, okay, for these numbers, for these children who have barriers to their education. Absolutely. Any other comments or questions or concerns about anything that we did from phase 2? We're going to look at names in a minute, and then we're going to move to phase 3. No? Okay. So you have it set up by math. All of the names are here. It gives you the gender, the grade. There's a column for special ed, for economically disadvantaged. There's a 1 if they fit into that category, and a 0 if they don't. You'll see their scores, as well if you want to see that. So what I'd like you to look at, and we'll take about 15 minutes or so to give you an opportunity to look at it. I want to know how many kids, by name, not their names, but by number, how many kids who show up in the bottom 30% in reading also show up in writing? And then of those kids, how many of them also, if they happen to be in fourth grade, actually show up in the bottom 30% in writing. So if our kids aren't doing well, the big question is it one subject or is it multiple subjects? Okay, because I think that changes how we address the solution later. Okay, so here's one for this group. Here's one for this group. Do you want to say anything else about this list?
No, I think that's fine.
Okay. Okay, so take a few minutes and let's pour over that. Again, the question is, how many kids show up on both lists? And then the third list as well. And they're alphabetical. They may not be alphabetical. They're by score.
By highest to lowest?
I think they're by highest to lowest. So go ahead and take a look. Let's talk about, yeah, it's all right. When you did this, what did you discover? Okay, go ahead, Pat.
Very many of them are economically disadvantaged.
Many of what? The bottom?
Many of the ones that have all three subjects
Oh, okay.
are economically disadvantaged. And I would say it looks like a lot of that.
But if you just look at math and reading, this in fourth grade, it's not as big a number. So the connection seems to be between reading and writing.
The connection between reading and writing.
So when we look at our fifth graders, 9 out of 17 were low in both math and reading, level 3 in both math.
All right, fifth grade, say that again, John. I'll write that down.
Fifth grade, 9 out of 17 level 3 students were in both math and reading. And only 4 of those 9 kids were economically disadvantaged.
4 of 9. 4 of 9 were eating. What were the other ones?
We didn't
All right, that's all right. Yeah, that's all right. Okay. What else are we discovering when we look at these lists?
It seems to be in reading anyway, I don't know about the others, that about a third of the kids were proficient.
Yes. In reading, a third of the bottom 30% were proficient.
For what grade? That's not
In what grades?
Oh, I have the math.
Yeah.
I have math. No, what grade? Okay, I'm sorry.
In fourth
Just fourth?
and fifth.
Fourth and fifth.
Fourth and fifth.
All right. And sixth? All right. Because, of course, if you have 81% of your kids passing the test, then, you got to pull 11% from somewhere, the lowest level green, right? Become part of the bottom 30%. Sure. That, the state would argue, is a really good problem to have. When your bottom 30% would be 100% green, or a mixture of green and blue, then they're like, that's a good problem to have. Because statistically, you'll always have a bottom 30%. I mean, whatever. But if they're all blue and green, then you're over the 85, and your kids are proficient. Even though I may not be as successful as Pat, I'm still proficient on the test. So did we see a lot of kids who showed up in both reading and math? Yes, right? Reading, math, and writing in grade 4, you saw that as well. What else do you take away from, I know you were looking at lists and comparing things. What else did this provide, shed light on that you didn't already know?
I think it reinforced, as an interventionist, it reinforced that we're working with the majority of the right kids. Like our selecting, the way that we select the kids is working. But it's also, I still don't think we've got the right interventions in place for these kids.
Okay, and that'll be a causation that we'll probably need to examine in a minute when we move to stage 3. If we're working with the right groups of kids, how come they're not moving? Or maybe they are. I mean, the names would mean nothing to me. I wouldn't have any idea.
I'd also like to see how many of these children that still didn't pass were better than they were last year. Then your intervention would have worked.
That's
If they grew more than a year, then even though they're in the bottom 30% and they didn't pass, they're better. They grew.
They're growing, absolutely. And this doesn't give us that information because there's always more you can dig at to find out more and more and more. Okay.
Like economically disadvantaged doesn't matter, because if half of them can be successful, then all of them can be.
So this proves a different layer for you.
Me, it does.
That's a very interesting comment.
I mean, it's not just me. I mean, it's also interventions and, frequent, progress monitoring. But to me, that can't be an excuse anymore.
Right.
They don't value education. They don't,
Yeah. Yeah, so
sweet like that.
that's good. That's good. I think the big message is it is possible. It is possible. And we just have to continue to show other people how possible it is.